Okay, I thought.
Yeah.
All right, good evening and welcome. This is a regularly scheduled city council budget workshop. If folks in the room could end conversation, that'd be great. Today is May 22nd, 2024. It's 5:15 PM. Around the table, we have Councilors Yakabaga, Councilor Trumbull, Councilor Fournier, Councilor Dean, Councilor Fish, myself, Councilor Chair Pelletier, and we are joined by Finance Director Dave Little. First item on the agenda is the 4th of July Corporation.
Thank you. We're gonna go through the other agencies tonight. And one of those is the 4th of July Corporation. This is typically an annual piece of the budget to support that organization. I did reach out to them. I don't think anybody, 4th of July is here. Certainly if the council would like to speak to them. The annual amount is typically around $5,000. The corporation puts together a veterans pancake breakfast. They do the 4th of July parade. They offer free concerts down at the waterfront as well as the fireworks. The previous councils have always been very supportive of the 4th of July Corporation and assisting with those events during the 4th of July. So that is in the city manager's recommended budget to leave the proposed amount at $5,000 in the upcoming year.
Questions on that?
Just a question, I don't know if it's for Tony or what. If you wanna come up to the
Yeah,
table,
come up
Tony,
to
just
the
sit
table.
beyond the. I know this, our contributions were pretty stable and consistent, but it seems like a few years ago, things with the organization were up and down, like one year it was like, we're gonna need a whole bunch of money to put the fireworks on. Seems like you guys are pretty stable now as an organization.
Well, that's great. Glad we give you that impression. But, it's like with all these nonprofits, who is well-staffed, who has enough money? None of us. But, we're doing everything we can. We've tried different aspects, rearranging the concert venue to bring in the VSO. That would be a massive undertaking, and, we're gonna go back to the smaller venue on the waterfront this year with just a mobile trailer, a mobile stage. And Dr. Ian Dickey is gonna put on his Chords for Cure concert where we pass the bucket out in the audience and try to raise some money for the pediatric center over Brewer. And getting donations has been just a joy. That was sarcasm if you didn't know.
Do any other municipalities contribute?
City of Brewer was $3,000 now.
Okay.
We need to talk to both municipalities and see if we can up that. I am the entire fundraising committee now, and it's a lot.
Oh, thanks for doing it.
Any questions on the day's events? We've really laid them up pretty thoroughly. But, we're gonna have pancakes and a parade and a concert and fireworks. It's a great day.
Sounds
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, it is. I can just say about our refugee population, they loved it. It was very different for them to watch and they were so excited and they went home talking about it for days afterwards. So it's definitely an event for new Mainers.
That is exciting to hear that. Thank you so very much.
No, of
But,
course.
this is Americana and in most communities, it's dying, it's one of the last bastions around. I don't know where else in the state of Maine you get this much activity for free. But we do our best to put this on, make it happen and make the 4th of July a memorable event for many people.
Seeing no other questions? We can move on. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you much. You guys have a great day and I thank you all for your contributions to the city. I know it's not always easy and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next item is the Paul Bunyan Snowmobile Club. Again, this is an annual allotment that the previous councils have always been supportive of putting into the budget. Again, it's around $3,000. $3,000 that's approximately what we collect in snowmobile excise tax. So essentially it's a pass through and float onto the club to help maintain trails and repairs and make new trails to try to make Bangor not only a destination, but something that, someplace that people can pass through and stop here if they need to, as they continue on with the trails throughout the state. Of course, last year was not the best season in the world for snowmobiling, but is Aaron?
I'm here.
Aaron, emailed Aaron several times. So Aaron Carver is here from the Paul Bunyan Snowmobile Club. Anybody has any questions regarding them, but we are proposing that we continue with our support of the club for $3,000.
Any questions right off the bat from anybody? But,
My question is about where the trail connects in and out of Bangor.
so there's a couple of spots we connect, if possible, with every outlying town that has a snowmobile club. But we have had some issues in the last few years of maintaining some of those connections. We're trying to work through some issues with maintaining the connection to Hamden. It's kind of difficult where we cross over near Ogden Road, 395.
Yep.
The railroad tracks are kind of a difficult spot there. But ideally, we would like to maintain 2 to 3 or more connections in and out of town. That way you could travel through, as David mentioned, stop, get fuel, get some lunch and continue on. I personally sled from my home in Bangor up to Millinocket or to New Hampshire. So it's nice to be able to not have to trailer out of town and just get on the sled and go.
Other questions?
Okay. we can-
All right, very good.
Thank
I
Thank
do
you.
want to say just before I stand up, we really do appreciate all of the help that we've had, the support over the years. It seems like Bangor is one of the only cities of the size of Bangor that has a snowmobile club, a trail system in it. Pretty much anywhere else that you live that's even half the population of Bangor, you have to load up and drive a ways to get on your sleds and go spend a weekend somewhere. So it's a rarity to even have this here, and we really do appreciate it. One thing I wanted to say that we're looking to work with the city on over the summer and going into the fall is the proposed ice arena recreation center on Griffin Road. We have a trail that goes through that field that allows us to get to the Dysart's fuel station and restaurant. So we just want to make sure that we can do our best to work with you folks to make sure that trail can still go, or that we can get a reroute around there. So, yeah,
Seems reasonable and doable.
awesome. Well, thank
Thank
you all
you.
so much. Appreciate your time and everything you do for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item tonight is from the Cultural Commission. Their initial budget request is $22,500. That includes both the typical budget of $20,000 plus $2,500 for the Artober event. That's right around the normal funding request that the city has proposed. They do have a new request in this year for a community events calendar. And that proposed cost is about $33,500. So that would be a new program request that is not currently in the city manager's proposed budget. So we would be looking for some guidance on that tonight, if possible, as to whether or not your support to add that to the budget. I anticipate that there's several members of the Cultural Commission here that will call up, and they provided a memo with what they've done with the funding in the past, and what they plan to do going forward. They're certainly here to answer any questions, particularly about the new request form that you may have.
Hello, my name's Nina. I'm the chair of the Culture Commission.
Counselor Trimble?
Yeah, just 2 questions. One on the additional 2,500, you said private was for October, but
Yes.
that's not a new program. So why is there?
No, because typically the 2,500 has been a new program request. We just put it into the actual budget this year because we've always supported
We've
it.
always funded.
We've
it,
always
yeah.
funded it.
Okay.
So normally it was 20,000 plus 2,500. We're just doing 22,500 as the regular budget request. So the only new program is the 33,500 for the
All right.
calendar.
So, and the other thing I just want to comment on is this new program, which I'm very supportive of somehow making it happen. I know this was a big project Emily Bean was very supportive of, and a couple of years ago she talked about it. But what we've got $50,000 in the tourism. Is that all going towards a new chamber? How much of that's spent? I mean, this seems like something would come under that kind of like tourism marketing money, or is there any other monies out there available besides adding it in the budget?
So when the chamber came forward to discuss their kind of targeted advertising, I believe what they were talking about was $4,000 a month
Correct.
And $4,000
So
a
it's
month
all
for a
gone.
1 year period
Right.
is $48,000.
All right, well, that's all I had. I mean, I'm supportive, not sure I would pay for it, so. Thanks.
I know last year's chair had requested, this is a budget or a project that has been talked about for many, many years. And last year, the budget that was discussed was 65,000 through a kind of a different approach to try to get this calendar printed. And so we've lowered that request this year, leveraging the existing online fairly new Bangor Sevens calendar. And so that helps us lower the budget from 65 to 33, but still reaching all Bangor residents who subscribe to the paper, as well as all Bangor residents with a postcard that'll be once yearly for the first year to test and then see how many more people we can reach. And right, the big thing was that this is a printed calendar so that we can reach those people who aren't online or not as online savvy. Any questions?
This postcard would have the full calendar on it? Or
The
a link to
postcard,
something?
Yeah, so the postcard will have a selection of a few upcoming events. And a link to the digital calendar. So we're not completely bypassing the digital. The weekly ad in the paper, which is called an ad, but it actually will have the upcoming weeks. I think we're doing the upcoming 10 days proposed events. So that those who receive the paper do have it. Also, those who receive the paper through their assisted living facility, or maybe aren't personal subscribers, but receive it through some other, see it in a doctor's office, they will also see that calendar. But right, the printed, because the postcard is more expensive, we can only in this budget do one. And so we can't print the full year's events because space. And also part of the goal here is to advertise more of the smaller events that are happening in town. So organizations that don't necessarily have a massive advertising budget and that don't have a full year's of events set ahead of time, like the Waterfront Concert Arena and other bigger organizations like that. So we're hoping to also reach nonprofits and other places that put on maybe a short-term event and plan something for next week or next month rather than the full year.
Counselor Yakubaga.
Likewise, I support this budget. I mean, we yet have to figure out how to provide this amount of money. But definitely the contribution of your commission has been significant to the city of Bangor. I mean, everyone is talking about this. It's the mural that we see that, I mean, every single project has been really changing the way, you know, Bangor is to the better, of course. So yeah, I'm in full support of this.
Is the major expense of the postcard just the mailing of the postcard? Or printing or something?
The print, the mailing is the bigger portion of the postcard. It's about $6,000 to send a postcard to every Bangor household. And we're working with Print Bangor. They're giving us a deal on the actual printing. And so the printing part of it is the smaller percentage, right? The postage, even with the nonprofit city postage, is still the bigger portion that we can.
Just thinking out loud, can we piggyback on the city mailings, like can these go with the sewer bills or anything? Is that a allowable thing that we could do?
Yeah.
I mean, I would support letting them go in with the sewer bills, something like that.
Yeah, we can do an insert in the bills.
That would take a lot of the cost out.
It would be like it may be, sewer bills may be a little awkward because we bill over a 13-week cycle.
Mhm.
So it would take 13 weeks before
Right.
everybody actually saw the postcard.
Mhm.
Depending on timing and preparation, in theory, we could possibly send them out with the tax bills, but again, that doesn't reach every resident.
Right.
So we can try to figure out some type of mailing or some way to do it.
Sure.
within the
Yes,
city.
we'd be happy to work with you to figure out what makes sense and what gets mailed out at what time so that people also don't miss it. I know I often open my sewer or always open my sewer bill, so definitely would love to have it be in a piece of mail that actually gets opened rather than something that just gets lost. We had looked at lots of different options also with the BDN ad of what else is possible, like an insert in the paper or something else that reaches maybe more people. And we found that the actual printed ad is the most economical and reaches the most people.
Will they also be running the calendar online?
Yes.
They will.
We also will, we will do digital ads for the BDN. Because even though the goal is the print, that is such a minimal expense for reaching so many more people. That we thought that might make sense within the budget. The BDN also has requested, so they've worked with us on figuring all these prices out. And their minimum spend is $25,000 for the full year to get the discounts on all of these ads. They're giving us about 70% off of their regular rates. But we have to make sure we spend $25,000. So we kind of are piecing it together a little bit. We're doing the ads in addition to the digital ads. In addition to, I think we said. That's somewhere. A sticker on the front in the beginning to make people aware that it's happening. And then a September Bangor Metro sponsorship. So the Bangor Metro is printed, that reaches a slightly different audience. And so that will have a calendar also with a CCD sponsorship on there.
Other questions or discussion? Yes.
I'm fine, with the request that come down quite a bit from last year, so
Right.
thank you. So we're making an effort. Yeah, if we can collaborate a little bit on the mailing, I think that would be a good thing. All the way around.
Mhm.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Library.
Our next item is the budget for the Bangor Library. Ben Treat is here from the library. Come on up, Ben. There may be questions. So we talked about this at a previous meeting that there is an increase in the city of Bangor support for the library of a little over $100,000. We're seeing the full impact of that increase this year because some carry forward money that we had to help mitigate that over the last couple of years was used up for fiscal year 24. So that's where that full 100,000 is coming in now. Overall, the library's budget is like a 4.99% increase. And as with most organizations, as well as the city, the largest piece of their expense side is personnel. Their personnel budget does include a COLA increase for their employees, which matches the COLA increase that we put in. They typically match whatever we put into our budget for our non-union employees. So that's the request, $2,067,759 from the city, which is an increase of $102,580. And Ben will be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Always.
Counselor Fournier.
Just full disclosure, I sit on the finance committee at the library, not that we make any hard decisions there. And I'm also a Bangor mechanic who decides for the board members for the library. It hasn't been a conflict in the past, but I do want to just bring it up.
Thank you. Questions do you all have? The one question I have was about the EAP.
Sure.
I noticed it was in the budget last year and not for this year.
Yeah, they increased it substantially. It had been $1,000 and they were increasing it. I can't remember what it was, but it was more than 100% increase. It was like, the usage was very low. I checked with department heads and said, is this particular EAP, is this model something that staff really want there to be there? They want that to be there and they just haven't had reason to use it yet? Or is this something where staff are like, yeah, this model doesn't really work for me? And it was the latter. I checked with staff at multiple levels. I realized as director, people don't necessarily want to say to me like, hey, so these are my specific mental health, factors, but in terms of whether the EAP was working for them or something that was important to them, it wasn't. And we, of course, didn't know who used the EAP, but we knew what the usage was. We did have people who actually reached out to us to say they'd had a not great experience with the referrals being essentially just searching Psychology Today and saying, these are people you can find on this free service. So it felt like it wasn't good money to spend, and because the service wasn't strong. I sent out an email to staff and said, here are some other services that offer similar levels of service but are free. One of them is the one that NAMI Maine recommends, that's specifically for communicating with someone about workplace related issues, things that feel upsetting in the workplace. Wouldn't be as full as an EAP, where you might go and say like, well, I have a situation in my like a domestic situation that I want to talk about. Which is certainly important, but so then the other referral I made was to Psychology Today and said, since this is what this service refers you to, if you are interested in finding information about counselors in the area, this is a really good place to find people who are counselors in the area. So it wasn't something we did willy-nilly, but it felt like it was the right choice to make, despite EAP, despite the mental health of staff and support of staff being really important, this wasn't the best way to do it. So.
That was kind of my follow-on question. So in lieu of an EAP, how are you working to support your staff's mental health?
Right. So we had a staff development day in oh gosh, I'm blanking on the month. I want to say it was in November, might have been October. And in staff development day, we talked about specific ways that staff can get support. We talked about specific stressors that staff are experiencing. When we had the EAP, I regularly let staff know about the EAP. Now that we don't, I regularly let them know about the other options that are available. And if there's ever an acute incident, that's the time when I would reach out to staff and specifically make them aware of services that might be available to them or might be interesting to them, either individually if one person had an acute experience that, or just generally if it's something that would have been experienced generally. So it's it's hard, but it's important to find ways to communicate that without overstepping and saying like, hey, let's talk about your mental health. That's also not necessarily the right role for the library director to have with a supervisee or someone who's where they supervise their boss, So that's the territory we're in. The other thing that we do is just make a really intentional we intentionally reach out to staff after something has happened and just talk through with them in a community building sort of way. We have not just Olivia, the social worker on staff, the ARPA funded social worker, but also just individual like department heads and saying like, so talking through the experience with staff so that they feel a sense of community with other people experiencing it, as opposed to feeling like it can feel sometimes when you refer somebody to mental health services, like you're saying, like, there might be something wrong with you after this happened. Why don't you go talk to somebody completely outside of, it's affirming to say, this is an experience we share together and you're part of a community. So department heads and I do that as well.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor Yaquaga.
So we know with ARPA fund, we can't have been at the table without talking about the situation at the library.
I know.
Yeah, so we know with ARPA funding, it was helpful in a way to support you guys with social worker on like helping staff and helping individuals who need support. But we feel there is an increased frustration by the public, and we have seen it in multiple occasions. I know you guys, you're doing your best. Our observation is the same about what's going on outside the library, in the park next to the library. And I don't know how it looks like inside the library now, because we see more around it, at the entrance, in the park next to it. But how does it look like inside?
Yeah, with the arrival of good weather, we actually see a lot fewer people who are unhoused in the library. On a day when it is raining, we still see fewer than we do in the wintertime. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with where are people drawn to at night and as well. So if the nighttime warming centers are downtown and the library's downtown, then that's you're downtown. And if the daytime, nighttime options are maybe out towards, towards the airport, during better weather, maybe that's where people are and they aren't as likely to head to the library for any particular reason. So inside things are better when there's warmer weather, in terms of behavior. There are still people, of course, who come in and engage in misconduct, including substance use, and threatening behavior, loud behavior that isn't, appropriate in the library. And we respond to that in the moment. The other thing we've done recently, that even as recently as the coffee and conversation that you all, or many of you were at, in a couple of a month or two ago, we've hired greeter positions. This is also the ARPA grant had specifically called for a janitor that we were going to hire. We found that to not be something that was easy for us to do. It was not a position that people were applying for in heavy numbers, and the ones who applied didn't necessarily have the resume that like really held up. Like, this is, yes, we're pulling you in for this dual role of both cleaning and behavior modification.
Yeah, it's not just
For
a
lack of a better
cleaning,
term.
obviously,
Yeah,
there's a lot more to it.
there's a lot to it, yeah. And so we instead are hiring multiple greeters who sit at the front, at a large wooden table desk right at the atrium entrance. It is a hospitable position that's primarily about hospitality and helping people get to where they want to go in the library. But it's also a position where the person is up and moving around, and making sure, so if somebody starts smoking outside on the front, they walk over and tell the person you can't smoke. Before that, the only person who was at work, who was in the atrium, was the cafe staff who don't work for the library. Right, so and they're busy making food, right? So they can't go out and be like, hey, no smoking out on the lawn. So we have a position that's specifically for that. So if somebody if people are like play fighting out on the front lawn and then they want to come in, it's like, today isn't a day for you to be in the library. You're not going to be able to maintain in the library because you were just play fighting out on the front lawn. That's not library behavior. That's I'm sure there are places for that behavior, but it's not library behavior. So it's saying like what you were doing on the lawn impacts whether you're able to come inside, and controlling that. Because of the structure of the library, we have not, at least since, actually, I guess we haven't since 1912, had somebody looking out at the front lawn of the library. Like, it's never been that there was somebody positioned there to see out the front door of what was happening on the lawn, and now we have that, and we're able to have an impact because of that. Is that going to fix everything? No, it's still going to be like, while they're walking out there to address somebody smoking, there are people driving by seeing somebody smoking, it's going to continue. And if you drive by and see someone play fighting out there, you're going to see that at the same time they are, and it's not going to stop because, as you said, that's happening all around the city in different places at different times. And play fighting looks pretty threatening, right? It doesn't look like, oh, look at those boys fighting out there. It looks like two grown men fighting because that's what they're doing. And yet, they probably, neither of them would claim that they were assaulted. They're just engaging in behavior that isn't appropriate at the library. So those are some of the things that we think about. Can we control the situation? No, we can't be in control of every behavior before it happens, but we are able to respond to behaviors as they happen. The other issue there is follow-up, right? So if somebody is engaged in play fighting on the front lawn, and it was really just like they were tussling, and we're like, okay, you can't be in the library today because you were just doing that. If that's happening every day, that's a reason for us to tell them you can't be in the library for a year. Now, that wouldn't be a call to the police because there's no like violent acts the police need to go and respond to as a crime or something like that. That's not a good use of the police's time. We have red cards that we issue that just say, don't come back to the library until, and then we write the date on it. And it has a list of things you're not supposed to do in the library on the back of it. So it's stuff that you already know you're not supposed to do in the library, but other people don't know, you know? And so we issue that red card. And if they say like, yeah, well, so's your mother, and throw the card, you know, on the lawn, we pick up the card and we call the police if they come back because they've been told not to come to the library. And now it's a matter of them trespassing, really, like they need to be issued a formal criminal trespass warning. So we have stages there. I don't want to misuse the time of the police. If we don't need a police presence, then we don't need a police presence. But if we do need the person not to be there, again, we need a way to signify that and say, okay, it's, I guess there's a soccer metaphor with a red card, right? But it's a chance to say, nope, you're not allowed in the library. The card itself is white, it's legible, it just has a red around it. But it's, but that's some of the behavioral, like recognizing that there's staging, and it's not just well, you had a bad day today, but you can come in tomorrow. Like that's not a responsible way to treat my staff, right? To say like, well, you just have to keep putting up with bad behavior on a regular basis. So that's some of how we're dealing with that. Long answer, sorry.
No, that was good. Yeah, thanks.
Do you have a question?
Yes, just wondering, with the opening of some of the other facilities like the Hart Community Center, has that lessened the number of unhoused that are coming in to seek shelter? And would
Yeah.
more of those community centers help the library to maybe get back to your original goal of?
I think so, like it's still new, right? And so it's coupled with a change in the weather, so I can't say like, yes, absolutely, here's the spreadsheet that proves that, you know, of you know, these are the people who had been here and now they're at Hart. But I really do believe that it has that impact. The other thing is a big part of the social worker's role, and a part of what the greeters are trained in too, is helping to connect people with the services and places that they actually do need to be, and where they need to be to get services. So having Hart there as a venue for them is really good. Hart is a place where if you fall asleep, you're not woken up and told you can't sleep here, right? That's appropriate. The library is a place where if you fall asleep, we check and make sure that you're well enough to be in the library, and wake people up. We have to make sure that there's not an opioid overdose. It's a big space. We don't have eyes on everyone in our space all of the time. Nor would we want that from a library, right? You know, the kind of big brother. So we are not able to have eyes on everybody in that big building all the time. So we can't know, like, when did this person start to doze off and what were the reasons for them having dozed off? Because the rules can be different in that space, and because the relationship between the people managing the space and the purpose of the space are different. I really do believe that is going to make a real impact, but it's new yet, so I don't have like a spreadsheet to show you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. It's been-
So our next item tonight is to go over some of the questions that have come up in our previous budget meetings. And then go over some the capital project type items for the general fund, and then any other questions that I may have missed on here. So as we were going through the budget reviews for the airport, there was a question of what made up the other revenue number of 1.9 million. That is the use of fund balance of 1.3 million, their interest income and reimbursed expenses. The question came up as where do they stand with cash and investments? Through the end of the June 30th, 2023, the airport's cash investments total 34.3 million. The unassigned fund balance was 100.1 million. As of the time I wrote this memo, their cash and investments are around 41, and the unassigned fund balance is 91.5. That reflects the most recent council order where we took $6 million out of their fund balance to fund a new parking lot. So that's why there's an adjustment there from the 100 down to the 91, plus other transfers of them using the money during the fiscal year 24 budget process.
But sorry,
Yes, go ahead.
but your year-end number was 34 million in cash. And then it went up to 42 after the 6 came out. And then I think there was another 14 that was supposed to come out as well. That hasn't come out yet.
I'm not sure I'm aware of the 14.
Wasn't that for the? Oh, maybe it was 1.4 for the runway. Maybe that hasn't started yet. So I'm just, it's not adding up unless the
Right, but it's not,
airport did an incredibly good job.
right, but it's not a direct correlation of taking money out of fund balance and going into cash. So the 6 million that came out of fund balance to pay for, or to fund the runway project went into a capital account
Okay,
that where those expenses will be charged. The cash would have already been sitting previous cash, because there's not a direct correlation between cash and fund balance.
right, yeah, okay.
So their balance, their book balance of cash at the end of June was 34.3 million. Their current book balance of cash is 41.
Right,
As of last week.
not sure I'm following the math there. It tells me that the airport's doing very well.
Based strictly on cash, yes,
Yes,
because the question was related to specific cash. I
yeah,
have not looked at where they are as far as revenues
Yeah.
and expenses, but yes, cash wise, they're doing
Yeah.
very well.
okay,
Yes, and that is
yeah. no,
one time,
that's right.
one period in time. It does fluctuate
Yeah.
a lot.
Okay.
So.
Counselor Tremble?
Just a comment on the, I mean, it probably goes to a lot of other departments too, but when you look at the revenue hit for, oh, you see a lump sum and I don't think it tells the whole story, especially an organization like the airport. I mean, when you look over the changes in that, you see a lot of changes and net increases in revenue from fuel to parking. By looking at this, and I think, unless things have changed, I think our parking revenue is our second largest source of revenue at the airport, but I mean, I think that's significant. But nobody would know that by looking at, saying a 24 million, $24 million of revenue. Is there any breakdown in here in revenue that, yeah? I mean, it's not in this book, is it?
No, it's not.
No, I mean, I think, I don't know, I'm just not a fan of these budgets. Sorry, not the person.
These develop over time, doesn't mean they can't change.
I'm used to the ones from 20 years ago.
Every line.
Everything was in there.
The handwritten, Dan?
Yeah, no, they weren't, but I can tell you what everybody was making.
Any other questions about the airport? Okay,
Well, you have a question. Is parking still the second highest revenue stream at the airport? Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
I was thinking yes, but I'm
Yeah.
glad Jose was over there and Debbie.
Seeing
And
nods
we can
from
certainly
the gallery.
provide a breakdown for you.
Well, I only have this year, but,
Well, I think that's a
Yeah.
good point.
or maybe at the airport committee.
would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, we'd have quite a budget. But
It will be,
it's good to know.
significantly
Yeah,
thicker, but
yeah.
that's okay. We can look at doing that.
Or maybe.
Or even in
do
the
it
booklets
when-
or something, have it in backup materials in the iPad maybe.
Or we do it at a BED meeting, just kind of
Right,
outlining it.
yeah, we see a lot of information on passenger numbers and fuel sales, but not a lot of additional revenue details. It'd be helpful to know.
Mhm.
Thank you.
During the review of the Economic Development Fund, there was a question about the revenue change between 23 and 24. The assumption, I guess, or presumption at the time was that it may have been a lease that had gone away. But looking into that change, it was in fiscal year 23, we were using some fund balance money, which we did not use in 24, so that went away. And there was a loan repayment that was completed during that change too. So that explained the difference in the revenue between the fiscal years 23 and 24 for the Economic Development Fund. For the Water Quality Department, it was what makes up the other revenue line. And where's the revenue from other communities? Other revenue was the use of fund balance and the sale of salvage. Just so that for additional information, at June 30th, 2023, the water quality's unassigned fund balance was 68.4 million. Revenue from the other communities is part of the charges for services revenue line that is built into that. And for Bass Park, what makes up the revenue from uses of money, and that is the rental costs for the grandstand, track, and parking. During one of the reviews, there was a question regarding bus tickets and the potential of eliminating bus tickets. So in the proposed budget for fiscal year 25, ticket revenue last year was 470,000. And this year it's in the budget is for 500,000. So eliminating ticket revenue completely would be an impact of about 14 cents on the mill rate and add $31 to the average tax bill. There was a question about the finance FTEs, full-time equivalents, where they were a little skewed and looked weird. We did go back and double check that. The fiscal year 23 and 24 numbers were adjusted to reflect the change of treasury over to the records department and city clerk, but the number of FTEs was not changed, which the city manager had mentioned at the time. The correct FTEs for the finance department for 23 and 24 were 12, not the 17.5 that was reflected in the budget book. We've talked various times about payroll and health insurance and how that reflects to the total general fund budget. And just for percentage wise, there is a graph that we show you, but essentially the wages represent 42% of the total budget. Health insurance is approximately 9% and other fringes is 11%. So it makes up in total, just the payroll and health insurance costs are 62% of the overall budget. That is about 47 million out of the $76 million budget for the general fund, which includes the county tax and the Bangor Library. So that's what I have for questions. I'm not sure if I got them all. I think I did, but if there any questions anybody remembers that I did not answer?
Thank you.
Okay. So we're gonna go into a review of the capital plans. There's been conversations about the use of reserves and how much of the capital stuff is impacting the mill rate. So we thought we'd go over a sort of a breakdown of those, as well as what we haven't funded, recommended for funding, and the new request forms, and try to get a little bit more direction of a yay or nay of how much support there is for those. We didn't get a lot of necessarily, we didn't pick up any feedback from the initial meetings as to whether it was a clear yes or a clear no from the majority of the council. I will say before we get going, there has been some discussions regarding the $4.5 million that we transferred out of fund balance into the reserves, where that was a substantial, chunk of money for fiscal year 24. While we were looking into everything, we did discover that in April of 23, there was a council order to move $1,780,000 from fund balance into reserves. That entry did not get made. It got missed. So the 4.5 million that we transferred in fiscal year 24 that we did a few months ago is actually made up of that 1.7, and 2.7 is the actual fiscal year 24. So when looking at the history based on council orders, it looks like we transferred a little over 7 million over the last 2 years, but in reality, we only transferred the 4.5. 1.7 million should have been done last fiscal year. And then it would have been around 2.7 and change this fiscal year. But that, because the 1.7 hadn't get done, there was enough money in there for us to do the 4.5 this year. Putting procedures in place so that doesn't happen again, but it did get missed and did not get entered before the end of the fiscal year. So our first printout in your packet is, this is all of the items that we are recommending for funding that were capital requests. And so these are all the yeses, we should fund them, and it does break down how they're going to be funded. The key column is the column that's labeled operating budget. If you look at the total line of the first P or the first section, that comes down to 3.5 million. That includes the library, the 4th of July, the Cultural Commission, as well as Snowmobile Club. So if you take those items out, it's about 1.4 million. Part of that is capital, so you take that out, and the actual impact to the mill rate out of the $32.4 million that's being requested for funding, only 976,000 is actually impacting the mill rate. The rest is being funded by the use of the reserves that we fund with over the years, either some grant money or existing funds, savings from prior projects. Or there is some money that we typically will bond out money for debt service to pay for some of the very large projects. So there is not a significant amount of money that is impacting the actual taxpayer for the funding. And the stuff that we are putting into and being recommended to pay for out of the operating budget is typical equipment and vehicles that we need one, we need to replace, and two, we need on an annual basis. We have to buy police cars because of the usage. We have to buy plow trucks. We have to buy sidewalk plows. We have to have certain equipment. We have to buy new computers to stay updated. So those are the things that are there. The 900 or so thousand is not atypical. That is within the range of what is typically charged to the annual budget. It's not a significant increase from any other prior year regarding what impacts the actual mill rate on an ongoing basis. It's fairly average compared to what we would normally do. Is there any
Councilor
question?
Trumbull?
Yeah, actually, I'm kind of glad to see that the patrol vehicle is in the operating budget replacement. That wasn't always in there, was it? Did we bond the patrol vehicle some years?
There can be.
Because it just seems to me, even though it's a major expense, it's a recurring every year. We're buying
Exactly,
the
right.
vehicles, so it
And
should be
we're-
in the operating.
Right, we're trying
budget.
to move away from bonding recurring.
Right,
And our eventual goal will also be for our annual street paving, so it'd be part of the operating
Yeah.
budget, because it's an annual
I mean, I know
cost.
it's a long term, but we're spending that money every year.
Right,
And I mean, the library, I mean, I know the library, and the other agencies ones are already, they're in the budget every year, so they're not like in addition to this year's budget, they're already in
right,
every year's budget.
right. So we're hoping that might be a little clearer on how that breakdown is. So you know, there is money, we are currently using the reserves, that's why we fund the reserves to help mitigate increases, because it's still items that we would need, items the city would need to buy if we want, you know, functional vehicles and streets plowed and snow and sidewalks plowed. So we try to spread that out as much as we can and keep whatever impact there is to the mill rate as consistent as possible from year to year. The next section is what we did not recommend for funding. And most of these things we talked about, the community connector, their request to essentially fund their reserve, but we're going to use that money to pay for the local match of items for community connector. A small piece of equipment for central services, which is more of it'd be nice to have, but it's not required, or it's not a functionality issue. Repointing of City Hall, we've already discussed. We were looking for another way to fund that, which we have and we've already approved. The mobile stage, there's also alternatives looking in that for us to be able to use a portable stage. So we didn't want to put any money in there for something that we may have an alternative for. And then public services, Aaron Public Works is very good about, he, puts he labels all of his requests, with top priorities and works his way down. These are, some of his, lower end priorities. It'd be nice to have, but, he's certainly okay with not funding them because he understands that, this would be additional impact on the mill rate. So the $1.1 million of items that were requested, are not in the, approved or recommended budget by the city manager.
Just a question.
Mhm.
I'm okay with this list. The only question is on and it's the smallest item. The pavement striping machine, is that to replace a piece or is that a new piece of equipment that would actually have some payback to it?
That is, I believe we have one that's getting
Okay, so
older.
that would-
It will still,
That's just some
it's still
in-house,
good for another
small
year.
in-house jobs. and
Yes.
whatever.
Because we mostly contract that out, but they
Right.
do some small parking lot type stuff. They can get by with what they have. That will probably be in next year's as a request to be funded. So our next item is some of the new programs. Ideally, we'll get, some, confirmation with yeses or nos, so we'll know how to build those into, and to the budget and the impact. So the first item was a new dispatcher position at Community Connector. That was a new program request, $80,131 was the estimated cost. Again, that because it's a new position, that would be ongoing. That would be a 2%, 2-cent increase to the mill rate, if added back in. The information services, our network database security analysts of 112,000, that would be a 3-cent increase. I will say that I have talked with our IT director. And what we're gonna do over the next year is we're going to reevaluate where we are. We have some new staff. We want to get a little more time under our belt with their full capabilities. And see what we may need, and we probably will come forth with a request for next year, so we don't need to worry about funding that for this year. One of the questions that was asked at a meeting was whether we looked at outsourcing that. We did. He did reach out to companies that could provide network and security analyst work when we were down 3 people in IT at one point. And to essentially, it would be at least double that cost. It was well over $200,000 for an outside company to provide that service. And again, that doesn't replace the entire IT staff. It would only be the database and the security piece. We would still need to have technicians in order to handle day-to-day operations, as well as database operational stuff versus securing the database. It's a different skill set. So it does seem that potentially staff is the cheaper way to go, but we're gonna look at what we really need and maybe how we can parse that out with the current staff that we have, or see what our demands are. The next item is the Placer AI for the planning department. That's 24,000. Impact to the mill rate was essentially a penny. It did seem like there was support for that from the council. I'm not sure that I got a feel from a majority support, but it did seem like that had some traction. So just looking for some clarification on that. The next item is the third-party service provider for the downtown partnership. So that's Street Plus. The original cost estimate that we had was 436,000. Their request was for 340. That would be 10 cents on the mill rate if that is funded directly to the taxpayer. And then the last item is the Cultural Commission events calendar for 33.5, which was discussed tonight. I did hear 3 clear yeses in support of that, but I'd like a little more clarity from the rest of the council that's here. So if we can go, I guess, any way we want to go through those to let us know what direction you would like us to take.
And can I just add one point of clarity for the third party service provider?
Mhm.
So following the meeting, we did reach out to
Yes.
the TIF attorneys. And it is not currently within our program, but the TIF attorney is going to meet with DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development at the state level, and share the proposal to see if it would be an allowable expense. So we had said, could we maybe do it this week? It was a holiday. Not quite sure where that is, so hopefully we'll have that information next
I
week.
told the commissioner Friday she might be hearing something from us.
Okay, it doesn't go to her.
No, she told Tina somebody.
Tina,
Okay.
correct.
Counselor Trumbull.
Do we have any revenue changes at all, from Phil or anything?
We're gonna hear updated information from Phil next week. So tonight is more of a sort of a, do we build these into the model or do we not build these into the model if there's not support for any particular item? If we can get that tonight, ideally, that will help us try to draft next week's information when we get the information from Phil.
Could we just include it as part of next week's information? Because I think it would be far more helpful if we understood sort of where we were
Yeah,
with our assessed value.
yes.
Mhm.
It feels. Because depending on how the assessed value comes, we may have other thoughts. And so,
So that's happening a week earlier than,
yes.
Yes, it was originally budgeted for June, Phil, so that he could be ready for next week.
great,
Even though it's pre-council, we thought earlier is better to
It
try to
is.
get a handle as to where we might be.
I mean, from my perspective, all of these programs sound great
Okay.
until I figure out what the mill rate's gonna be. And then we need to have a
Then you'll pick and
conversation.
choose, yes.
That's right.
And that's fine. And that, I guess, as long as there's not a clear no, we will operate as though these are all a potential possibility.
Counselor Trumbull?
And I would, just to add on what you said, I mean, it's the initial budget that's presented, I think, shows a nickel increase in the mill rate. So obviously, I think we're all on the same page. It's not just about the mill rate. I think I can go back to the beginning of the book. Was it $340, the impact to the average taxpayers, the budget is?
440.
430.
Oh, I'm dyslexic there, 430.
It came down to about, I think, 370 with the potential changes that the school
The school
department are
department,
Yes, the
considering.
school changes are.
Yeah,
So-
so
it's
almost
pretty good. So there's
$400,
room.
and that's
too
just for the
much.
average taxpayer,
That's
which the
correct.
average house is a 250 now in Bangor.
I think it was a little bit higher
240.
than that.
Yeah, it was like 256, 265,
And if
somewhere
you're
around in there.
looking, there's not much on the market for under 500,000, so I think a lot of people are gonna see a substantial increase, so even if it's somebody that's living in a $500,000 house is not gonna be happy to be paying an extra substantial amount, $50 a month probably,
Yeah,
$50 or
probably.
$60 a month for taxes.
Not until.
Yeah.
Counselor Dean?
I just have a question on the cultural commission. To justify the 33.5, is there any increased revenue by sending out these calendars? Will that produce, it's all?
No.
Okay,
No.
so,
It's support for the community-based events.
so it really won't increase traffic or purchases.
But again, to Dave's point too, is part of what we'll do is it kind of puts him under the timeline because Phil's coming a week early, but. You know, when we do our budget assumptions, we do them, some of them we start in February. So it gives us a chance to go back and relook at some lines and say, all right, the assumptions that we made in February, March. And even sometimes we shouldn't be making them in early April. How are we holding up? Has anything changed? Do we have any other opportunities?
Counselor Fournier?
so I know we're looking into the TIF
Yeah.
thing for
Yeah,
downtown partnership. Were there other options there?
I did have our grant writer look in. There isn't anything that is clear that that would be covered under a grant. There's some maybes that it would be covered, or at least partially covered under a grant program. But as we mentioned, if we're gonna go with a grant program, we've got to wait for the application period for the grant.
Right.
And if we start the program now, the grant won't cover it, so we would have to delay implementation of the program until the grant opportunity opened up. There isn't any current application processes that we could go under, but there may be programs that it would fit under, but we would have to wait. I'm not sure, at least 6 months, if not possibly a year before 8 months before the application process opened back up. And even then, I think it would only be partially covered. I don't think we would get the full amount.
Are there any ARPA grants that we have awarded in the last year that may not come to fruition?
so it's interesting that you asked that. So we're trying to work on an update. Every pre-council meetings keeps getting full, but we're working on an ARPA update for sometime in June. Because for some of those first applicants, their first annual reporting period has closed. So we want to be able to come back. I can tell you at this point, I think we just, everybody obviously is trying to make sure that they can meet the deadline. I'm not sure today anybody would say they wouldn't. But I think it's a good opportunity in June to tell you where everything is. Here's what people are saying, here's what they're sharing that they're in their process. And because we are gonna have to make that determination by September, I believe. And maybe even earlier, because you do want people to have enough time to succeed, but
Of course. My thought
There's an
was, if there's any
Mhm.
people who applied for grants who may not be able to use the
Yep.
grant money, perhaps that's a way to offset some of this
Yep.
cost. You know, with the idea that we would maybe use ARPA funds for the first year and
Correct.
hopefully be able to roll it.
Right, because we have to
TIF
find a way to fund it.
If we
going forward.
chose to renew in years 2 and 3.
Yep.
But
yes. So
given
there-
our other priority,
Mhm.
priority 1 for the
Yes.
year, that may or may not make sense.
And I think at that point too, it would be helpful for you all to see as a group too. I think you're sitting at about 2.6 or $2.8 million of ARPA funds that you haven't particularly
That's right.
specifically allocated. And we understand that the kind of the unknown is the utility. You know, the estimates from the engineers are $1.5 to $2 million for the utilities and infrastructure related to Grandview. So there may be some other housing opportunities too.
So looking at the unallocated
Mhm.
ARPA money, even if we couldn't reach what they're requesting, and you know, is there any way to look at that for even, you know, a portion of what they're asking to help them get started? And then maybe, you know, as Councilor Pelletier said, and then they can come up with something beyond that. Apparently, it's a 3-year commitment. So is there any way we can look at the unallocated ARPA to not affect the taxpayer?
Sure, if that's what you'd like, I would say, I did ask, so we've done 2 things with a third party provider. We followed up with the attorney, and I was surprised, he said DECD has kind of gotten a little broader. So that was good to hear. But he was an attorney and he's not gonna commit one way or the other before he talks to the department. And then the other piece of it is going back to the Downtown Bengal Partnership and saying, okay. Now that the downtown beat position is in place, it's from 9 AM to 7 PM, Tuesdays through Fridays. Do you feel that changes your staffing needs? And I asked some additional questions about some of the costs because I can't help myself. And also said, you know, does it make sense, while it's nice to want to be at 24/7, does it make sense to start somewhere less than? So I had sent all of that off to the DVP, and so she was working on some of the responses to that.
Counselor Dean and then Counselor Trumbull.
I did speak with Betsy regarding possibly servicing the restrooms.
Mhm.
And she said that she checked, they wouldn't actually service them, but they would check in on them,
Right,
which I think would be. a
another set of
benefit.
eyes is another set of eyes.
So that might be something that would, again,
Yeah.
justify having them there. So I know there's a lot of controversy about
Okay.
maintenance.
Counselor Trumbull.
No, I was just gonna say on all these, I mean, obviously, I think they're all good proposals. It'd be nice to support them all. But they're not just a one-time thing. Once you put them in the budget, they're gonna be there every year and they're gonna build every year. So it's tough for me to add things. And we are taking, I don't see it every year. I don't remember many things we've taken out of the budget. We like to put things in, but I mean, when you start with dispatcher, I mean, we added, I think, 1.5 positions to the bus system last year. I mean, everybody wants to support the bus. We'd like to see another, add additional service to the bus, but I mean, that's not, you know, it's not an insignificant amount of money. And I don't know what's gonna happen when we see the figures next week, so I mean, even though it's a small amount of money, the Cultural Commission, maybe we can cut that back a little bit if we're gonna do the mailing for them on the postcard. And if we move forward, I think the downtown is a key part of the city. It's not where we want it to be. I'm not sure this proposal is a solution or that they think it's gonna be. I think we've got to try something. And if whatever we do, I just think they need to they need to have more skin in the game. I think the downtown tax needs to get up above the dollar range and then see what we need to come up with in the city, or whether it's through ARPA funding or through the taxpayer or through the TIF district. But I think the downtown district tax needs to be bumped up. I think they need to pay for, I don't think it can fall on the no taxpayer to pay this whole bill.
I think we're all on the same page. Mhm.
So everybody go home and look for magic beans.
Totally. What else do you need from us tonight?
I'm good. I think unless there's any other questions that anybody has, next week, we will do a quick rundown of the enterprise funds. Any outstanding questions, any changes that they have, that the airport has has a little bit of a change, as well as the basketball. And, we'll have Phil do his, assessment update, and we'll have hopefully some more information, and then I anticipate that will probably go into the June meeting as well for us to try to wrap stuff up before the first council meeting where the city manager's proposed budget will be on the agenda.
Great.
And I will just share too, that the timeline for the city assessor is he's gonna be pulling together his report Wednesday.
Hmm.
So there will not be anything in your
Yeah.
packet. Do not be alarmed, but we felt it was more important that you hear it earlier rather than later. And to wait for the information to be available in the packet, there'll be an opportunity for additional questions and comments. So the same thing as to what the impact is gonna look like on the taxpayer, because until we have the information from Phil, we can't actually go through that iteration. And especially for Counselor Fish and Counselor Dean. So what I hope you heard Dave share is that the first reading of the budget is always the city manager's recommended budget. So even if next week there was the magic beans
Right.
worked and everybody was happy, that first reading would not reflect that change. So the first reading is always the manager's recommended budget, and then at the second meeting, you'll you'll amend by substitution, and it will reflect all of the changes the council as a whole has supported.
Anything else for the good of the order? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
It's a nice night.
It is.